Welcome back to All Day Live. I'm Amy Huckert. It's 1:51 on this Thursday afternoon. Thanks so much for being with us today, spending part of your afternoon with us. Had a lot of live events and sort of developing news today. This was something that was supposed to happen today, and then it got canceled. There was a hearing on Capitol Hill, but we wanted to go ahead with this interview anyway because it involves a Minnesota native who looks like he's on the verge of becoming the country's national cyber director. The nomination for Sean Cairncross is expected to go before the Senate for a full vote, where his confirmation does seem pretty likely. So joining me now is a senior reporter at Cybersecurity Dive News, Eric Geller. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Sean Cairncross, not a name that I think is familiar to most people here in Minnesota. What do we know about his career and who he is?
So Sean has been close to the Trump orbit for a while. In Trump's first term, he was the CEO of a foreign aid group called the Millennium Challenge Corporation. He was also an advisor to Reince Priebus, who was Trump's chief of staff at the time. And he's also worked at the Republican National Committee. He was the chief operating officer. And last year, they brought him in to advise the RNC on some of the campaign finances at the end of the cycle. So he's somebody who's really been close to the president's orbit and the senior advisors around President Trump for several years. Yeah. He does not have any cybersecurity or technology background, but as we can get into, he talked a little bit about that at his confirmation hearing recently.
Oh, yeah, I'm curious. Go ahead and tell it. What did he say about that?
Well, he made 2 points. One is that when he was at the RNC and other places, he has been involved in responding to cyber attacks as an executive and working with the FBI, for example. And so he understands the process that a business or any other organization has to go through when they get hacked. And so he understands cyber from sort of that side of things, even if he wasn't like a practitioner himself. The other point he made was this is really a job that is not about being an expert coder or a hacker or anything like that. This is a role in the White House where you're going to have to manage a team of people who have expertise on their own, but you're really a manager. You're also a conduit to the president, bringing information to the president. And he says that he has experience managing organizations, picking the right people for the job. And as I mentioned, he does have those ties to President Trump.
Okay, and so so that's helpful to understand kind of the org chart or the position itself. But what can you help us understand a little bit more about what types of things would that agency do? Maybe not the director, him or herself, but the agency. Obviously, cyber, but to a lot of people, that word is just kind of a big word that covers a lot of different things.
Absolutely. So, you've got the FBI that will investigate a cyber attack when it happens. But what Congress realized a few years ago when they created this office was there's really no one at the White House whose job it is in law to think about cybersecurity from the big picture, thinking about what we as a country need to do to protect ourselves in the long term, not just responding to the hack of the day.
Yeah.
So this office, you can sort of think of it like the U.S. Trade Representative, another office in the White House. They research the issues around cybersecurity. They come up with proposals for the president to consider about how can we do cybersecurity better as a country. And there are a lot of folks who are leaders at agencies in the government that do cybersecurity at the ground level. Sean Cairncross, if he's confirmed, is going to be the person at President Trump's side telling him the entire government's perspective on cyber issues and where he should be thinking about these very complex issues over the next few years.
Okay. For lay people, like me, I think about cybersecurity and I think, isn't this the kind of world where the goalpost just keeps moving? I mean, can you ever really get out ahead of this kind of thing?
Absolutely, and that is one of the things that this office has tried to do over the past few years. Under the Biden administration, that's when it got launched, and the people who work there were trying to study issues that were emerging over the past few years as bigger challenges. So how do we protect the software that we create so that when you install a program on your computer, you know that it's safe? How can you trust that in the same way that you can buy a refrigerator with an Energy Star logo on it and know that it's passed some test that means it's energy efficient? How can we think about doing that with security? So you buy a piece of software and you know that it's actually safe, that it's been tested. Issues like that are just coming up to the level of policymakers and not just in the weeds, as a computer nerd issue, that's what this office would be looking at.
I see. Okay. Can I take you on just a little bit of a broader question for a second? Because this is a world that you cover extensively. I'm so curious about cybersecurity threats. We think about, I don't know, a lot of people in their head think about, oh gosh, it's an organized foreign group. These guys are sitting in a dark room and they're wearing masks and they're just targeting major corporations. But what is the reality? Like, how vulnerable are we as citizens of this country and our different cities and states?
Well, there's kind of a two-pronged threat that we're facing. So on the one hand, you have governments like Russia and China that really want to break into not only government agencies to steal our, sensitive documents, but they also want to break into our water facilities, our power plants, our hospitals. And they want to do that to show the US government that if we ever get into a war, they can turn off the lights in those places. They can prevent people from getting health care. So that's one side of the threat. It's really part of foreign policy. The other side of things is criminal groups really, really, really love stealing money from companies that are poorly defended, and they're finding a lot of them out there. So they're breaking into these companies, they're stealing their data, they're telling them, pay us $500 million or you're never going to get your data back. And that affects real people. If that's a hospital, you might not be able to get your MRI scan that day, right? So that's a real problem for people on the ground. Those are the two major threats that we see right now, but there's also a lot of other issues that companies face in this area because it's so hard to protect yourself against people who really know what they're doing, especially if you're a large company. You have a lot of employees that you need to train to do this right.
One of the things I imagine that a director would look at is, as you're talking about things like hospitals, power plants, water plants, I'm curious if you have any insight into how big the gap is between where they are right now and where they need to be as far as cybersecurity goes.
I would say that it varies a lot, and in particular, a lot of rural hospitals, rural water treatment facilities do not have the people or the money they need to do even some of the basics. This is a problem that the government's been working on for several years, and yes, Sean Cairncross, if he's confirmed, would kind of be sitting on top of these efforts and figuring out, like from a strategic lens, high-level lens, where should the government be investing resources to help protect some of those smaller, what we call critical infrastructure organizations like hospitals that really just can't defend themselves against the Russian government on their own.
Okay. Eric Geller, senior reporter at Cybersecurity Dive News. Thanks so much for your time today and your insights. Not a big footprint for Mr. Cairncross here in Minnesota, so it was interesting to learn a little bit about him and this position. We'll just keep our eyes on it. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.